Hello, Music Multiverse listeners, and welcome to Beyond Your Radio. I'm your host, Mark Kuligowski. Welcome to a brand new show, second time out here. If you don't know, we select a warring decree per month. We ask our panelists to select their top 5 albums based on that war decree, and they will each reveal their 5 albums. But from there, we reveal each album. They'll score points for being selected by the other panelists. So the more an album is selected, the higher the ranking becomes because everybody seems to be in agreement. There are times when we, look to the point scores on one of the sites just in case of a tie, or in the case of last time with Alex, he coerced us to getting 2 albums in. He's not here today. There's no coercion. It's just my final rule. And depending on the number of panelists, obviously the amount is different each time, each month. We can only keep 8 albums into the war. So 8. So that's 1 versus 4 and 2 versus 3 on one side, and 1 versus 4 and 2 versus 3 on the other side. So, and then after that, we go back to the panelists when the next war begins, and 1 versus 4, they decide. And then 2 versus 3, they decide, and so forth and so on until we have 1 album remaining, and that 1 album will stay all year until the final war happens at the end of the year. And we also had a little interesting thing. The album listen challenge, the one that scores the highest, will also be placed into that final war at the end of the year. And right now we've only had 1, and that was Eva Carboni. She is right now in that position. Whether she will remain there will be up to the panelists that go on to album listen challenge. So what was the war decree? Well, the war decree had to be the 2 biggest bands on the planet ever, pretty much. It's the Beatles versus the Rolling Stones. And in this, because the Rolling Stones is just too damn long, it's the Beatles and the Stones. So we all know when it comes right down to it, a Stone is going to crush a Beatle, but that's got nothing to do with it. This is about music, not about who's got a harder shell. So let's see. What do we got here? We got to know anything else about this? Where am I? Oh, so yeah, 2 iconic bands. They came around just about at the same time, with what, maybe a year apart before?
Yep.
I think
Yep.
that's pretty much true. The musical impression on nations that participate in music, it will be remain timeless and continual. They've marked the music multiverse basically forever, and they will be discussed forever. And on this show, we're not going to battle that discussion because the show's long enough already as it is. So we're going to keep it short and real as possible. We can pontificate it a bit and tell us, why you picked the albums you did. But on the panel tonight, he's continually jaywalking on Abbey Road. Ray Geska. He's never been arrested once yet for it. Never. He's never had goat's head soup, and he'd like to keep it that way. Jeff Crichton. Yeah. It's been a hard day's night because we keep her up past her bedtime and work her musical mind to death daily. Damn is on the program.
Yep, it's past my bedtime.
All right, so she's going to let me do the dirty work. That's right, Susie Q. She has her 5, so that's where we'll start. After that, she can't vote because she's not here. So she didn't want to bother everybody with that hacking every 15 seconds or whatever. So her number 5 in the Beatles side is, I didn't write the 5s down. Yeah, Please Please Me was number 5. Her number 4 is Abbey Road. Number 3, Sgt. Pepper. Number 2, Revolver. And number 1, The White Album. So pretty much maybe as expected, except for Please Me, maybe. I don't know. But there's hers. That's pretty simple. She had no pontification except listing some of the songs that she, wanted to make mention of. So, that being the case, we'll start with Ray because he's got the wall marked. He's got his shirt ready to go. He is ready for this. He's been ready for this war, I will tell you, for quite some time.
But all right, well, great. Started talking off before we started recording here, but the Beatles in my opinion, really were the ones to start the whole album rock revolution. Prior to that, most bands had albums, had some hits, had some filler stuff, but 66 into 67 really started the whole album rock revolution. The Beatles were kind of behind it. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily picking their 1966 releases. I'm going to pick one of them, but most likely not the other one. However, number 5, I'll take what's likely the most recognizable album of all time amongst. I mean, if you're a deep Beatles fan, like I know one guy on this panel is, you might beg to differ. But amongst the general public over time, this is the album that really put them on the grand map, and definitely in the history of modern music. They had done a lot prior to the Summer of Love in '67, but they put a dent into the earth with the release of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Certainly among the most overplayed albums of all time, but simply gargantuan, spectacular, amazing. The work they did on, following the work of the prior albums, but in the Summer of Love, it just was a whole new game with the release of this legendary album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Cool.
I did say, the earlier albums were just, a lot of singles collected, and I still feel that way, but I got to go with this album at number 4. I'm a much bigger overall Beatlemania guy than I am for the, later drugged out Hare Krishna Beatles. But sorry, Jeff. Help, I'm going to take at number 4. You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, Another Girl, Ticket to Ride, I've Just Seen a Face, Yesterday. I guess you had to be a Monster fan or someone that grew up in the early days to appreciate the movie. I never really did, but I sure did love a bunch of the songs here. So I'm going with Help at number 4. At number 3, I looked over the list, and Jeff knows, and I made mention on a couple previous episode or two. There's a couple of those bigger albums that I'm not really a huge fan at. So at number 3, I am going to go with the other movie soundtrack. Not interested again in watching the movie. I was never really into English humor. I'm not into Monty Python. I'm not into Benny Hill. I'm not into the Beatles. But the songs, it's a different story. More of a collection of hits than a true concept album for me. A Hard Day's Night just kept you singing all day, every day. The title track, I'm Happy Just to Dance with Her. Can't Buy Me Love. Things We Said Today. You Can't Do That. If I Fell, on and on. I Should Have Known Better. Just one of the many great albums. And I'm going with A Hard Day's Night at number 3. Just love that Beatlemania stuff. Tough to pick a number 1 and a number 2. It really came down. I wanted to go 1A, 1B, but then, unlike my friend Crichton, I like to play by the rules. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick a 2 and then a 1. And again, I went back and forth. All the Beatlemania stuff I love, but album-wise, these last 2 are just spectacular and among the greatest albums of all time, regardless of who the band is. This album took the Beatles from being that touring mop top, with all the girls screaming band into a band that they were ready to take it and make it their own. No more touring, just a lot of hours in the studio creating masterpieces. And this was the one that started it for that new era of the Beatles. The one they were officially crowned as mature artists. It's Rubber Soul, likely my favorite Beatles song of all time in my life is the crowning achievement on this record. Then you had Norwegian Wood, Drive My Car, Nowhere Man, and so many more. Just simply spectacular. And then number 1, this album was their final album recorded, not their final album released. George Harrison likely had his finest hour on this album with 2 of the most incredible songs then and 2 of the most incredible songs now in Here Comes the Sun and Something. And then the whole Golden Slumbers medley and this whole suite that they created, on this album was just incredible. And just to listen to the album, it's one that I'll tell you, of all their albums, this is the one that never gets dull, never gets boring. It seems so fresh every time you hear it. It could be in any decade, in any generation, and sound like a new album. And this album, of course, is Abbey Road.
Very nice.
Thank you very much.
Did you get that signed?
I didn't. Oh, actually, yeah, Pete Best and who was the other guy? Never mind.
Well, I can only have that followed up by going to Jeff Crichton so he can defend himself and his position on where he picked his 5 for both bands. So, Jeff?
I'm done. See ya.
Oh, you going for a swim?
Yeah, I'm going to climb the tree behind me. So, my number 5, I'm going to where it all began for us as Americans. I'm not taking the plane over the pond. But the first thing that we heard as Americans was I Want to Hold Your Hand, right? When it was released and shot up the charts before Ed Sullivan said, those boys have something here, and brought them over here. So my number 5 album is where it all began for us as Americans. Meet the Beatles, the American album that started it all. Okay. Started out, that album starts out with I Want to Hold Your Hand. And then we get into the B side of that with McCartney calling out 1, 2, 3, 4, and you go and I Saw Her Standing There, and All My Loving is on that first side. Harrison's first written song, Don't Bother Me, starts side 2, and Ringo's song, I Want to Be Your Man, which Lennon and McCartney gave to the Stones, which happened to be their first single over in England, and they redid that with a Bo Diddley beat. So Meet the Beatles would be my number 5.
Okay.
Number 4 was the album that changed the world. Ray did a great build-up and explanation for that. But when we were waiting for that album, and the Beatles had heard Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, and it like fried their brain, and they went into the studio because they were kind of on a hiatus for a little while because Lennon was off doing a movie called How I Won the War, and McCartney was filming another British movie called The Family Way, and so when they went into the studio in December of '66, after they were done touring, and they started recording Strawberry Fields Forever, and then they went in the studio the following month and started recording Penny Lane, and so those 2 songs came out as a single in March of '67, preceding the Sgt. Pepper album.
Right.
And when that album was released on June 2nd in 1967, that was, like Ray said, that was the album of the Summer of Love. And in the midst of that album climbing and reaching the top of the charts, then they go and they put out All You Need Is Love. So Pepper, just a brilliant album from beginning to end. You know, great songs on there, and the epic ending of A Day in the Life, with that 44-second piano key fade out. So Pepper would be my number 4 album by the Fabs.
Yeah.
Funny thing there, Jeff, not to interrupt, but those 3 songs you recorded never ended up on Sgt. Pepper's.
No.
The 3 that you mentioned there, right?
Right.
They all went on to Magical Mystery Tour.
They went on the B side of Magical Mystery Tour. Yeah. Another fine album.
What about, and that wasn't like the next year.
No. Well, you know what? At the time, in '64, when Meet the Beatles came out, 2 months later, the Beatles' second album came out. And then A Hard Day's Night came out, in the summer, and they put out another album called Capitol Records was really going for the gusto on these guys, and they put out, an album called Something New, which half of this, they were just milking it. So my number.
Well, they were apparently in what was it in '64? The Beatles were for sale. So
yes, yeah. And so my number 3 album would be their final record. Abbey Road would be number 3. Just a brilliant record from beginning to end. Yes, George's finest moment with Something and Here Comes the Sun. The medley at the end, I like that whole second side is like perfect in every way.
Yeah.
So that would be my number 3. Number 2 would be the album that preceded Rubber Soul that came out in August of '66, Revolver, which is a brilliant Klaus Vormann cover. And I would and that album had some great songs on it. Harrison's Taxman, a brilliant song and a swipe at the British government. Eleanor Rigby's a classic. Ringo's Yellow Submarine, She Said, She Said. So it's funny, like the British album had the normal 14 songs, the American version only had 11. And
because they didn't think we'd understand it, right?
Yeah, well, they took
Maybe that's
some
what
of
the
those
Tragically Hip should have done on some of their records.
So they took some of those songs off Revolver. The Capitol Here took some of the songs off of that album and put it on with some singles and called it Yesterday and Today, which featured the classic Butcher cover. But I regress here. So Revolver would be number 2, along with the single that preceded that album, Paperback Writer and Rain.
Right.
Okay. And then my number 1 Beatle album, and that could change between like the top 3 or 4. So tonight, I'm going with Rubber Soul. Is number 1.
Okay.
That record that came out, it was their Christmas release in '65. 14 brilliant songs on the British album, 12 great songs on the American release. Drive My Car, which started the British album, wound up being on Yesterday and Today, but there were no singles on Rubber Soul. The most famous song, like Ray mentioned, In My Life, is on that record. Just some brilliant musicianship by the band. You hear the first sound of sitar on a rock record when George plays on Lennon's Norwegian Wood. And so Rubber Soul is number 1, along with along with the singles that came out like a week later that were recorded during that same sessions. We Can Work It Out and Day Tripper.
Yeah, they didn't make anything easy.
No, so there you go. So if you're a collector, you needed to have it all.
And that's kind of cool that they might have been. You think about it, that's early onset of what we're seeing today, where people are putting out special this and this. Maybe not right after, right? They're not striking while the iron's hot, which is probably stupid. They're waiting for like record store day 7 years later when no one gives a shit.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You really had to be on your game, man, to keep up with all those releases back then.
Yeah, and you had to have enough money to do it too, right?
Yeah, there were weeks and months when I did not drink milk at school, because my milk money was going to buying Beatles single.
And that Meet the Beatles, you had the Meet the Beatles album. That one's not in. That's not like one of their American collection anymore, right?
No. Well, all the American albums, they just released those in a box set this past November. So all the American albums were reissued.
So yeah, so you can pay more for less. Okay.
Well, I did not bite on that one at all.
But I bet you thought about it, right? You went,
No, because I have every American release and every British release, so on vinyl. So I didn't overpay for a box set that I didn't need.
He's budgeting.
Yes.
Smart. All right. Damn.
Well, guys, I knew this was going to be an easy show for me because I don't have to say anything except list my albums. All right. So number 5, Revolver. Number 4, Rubber Soul. Now, much to kind of, put Ray back in his seat, I love the Drug Out Hari Krishna and Monty Python stuff. Cuckoo Cachoo. So I'm going with number 3, Magical Mystery Tour.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
great record.
Just it was, you know, I was alive then, you guys. You weren't. So I remember sitting on my cousin's floor in little house in LaSalle Avenue in Niagara Falls upstairs and looking at that album cover, and my dad almost killing my cousin for letting me see that album cover because he thought it was going to put me down the road of debauchery. Number 2,
With a bunch of guys with bowl cuts. I don't know how that happens. But anyway.
You know
No,
what?
that was a crazy cover.
And-
that
And Magical Mystery Tour was the very first Beatles album that came out just in stereo. Pepper was the last mono last
Oh,
album came out
really?
in mono and stereo.
Well, I was going to say that, but I didn't know that. But cool.
I've never experienced mono. I've tried to catch it a couple of times.
No, but I'm don't.
And that will
Number
be
2.
edited.
Number 2 is Sergeant Pepper. And anybody that watches this show would know that my number 1 would be Abbey Road. I just love that album. And I just did that the other day. I was talking about Booker, was it Booker T and the MGs did the
Yeah.
So
Nice.
yeah, so those are my 5.
All right.
Yeah, good calling, Booker T. Yeah.
So I don't have anything from Rubber Soul up into in the I should say Rubber Soul back. I think it's probably my age, but my experience with the Beatles for Rubber Soul is Bobby McFerrin.
Ooh.
Maybe you can drive my car. He's pounding on his chest. Beep, 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 beep. Yeah. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
all right. And of course, I heard the covers sometimes before I heard the original. So that and the covers weren't that good. So that's a problem in itself, right? So
Oh yeah.
Rubber
I think
Soul
I
would
heard
probably,
Anne Murray first before I heard the Beatles.
yeah. Like my Rubber
You Won't
Soul
See
could have
Me.
been in my list, maybe. But all right, so number 5 for me is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Obviously, everyone's talked about it. Abbey Road's my number 4. My number 3 is Let It Be, and that's for reasons of what
Which
is
version?
on there.
The naked
Pardon?
version?
I would
naked or the full
rather
spec
put
or
the naked version,
overproduced?
but it's not really a true studio album. I guess it is just a remade, but I like them both. But my number 2 is Revolver, and Revolver can go from 1 to 2, 1 to 2. And I am still always infatuated by one of the greatest produced albums of all time, the White Album. That's just, I don't know how you're doing Nirvana in 1968, but they were doing it. So, I don't know how they managed it. The last part of that album is an entire trip to Sonic somewhere that nobody else was doing at the time. So
Would have been a great single album.
that's what a lot of people say. Yeah, so those are my 5. I will let I'm gonna go to Sue, and then I'll let Deb work the other way. So we'll do Deb, Jeff, and then Ray. We'll go back up the other way. So Sue with the Rolling Stones, okay? So, and I've had this comedy going back and forth with Jeff, and then I said, don't worry, Dirty Work will not beat out some Beatles album, but Sue has at number 5, Dirty Work.
Ooh.
With the Stones record that has the Harlem Shuffle on it. That's right, the Harlem Shuffle. Yes, that's her number 5. Number 4, she has Aftermath. At number 3, Beggar's Banquet. At number 2, Let It Bleed. And her number 1 is Sticky Fingers. So, that being said, Deb.
Mine aren't really in any particular order, and I know that I'm probably going to get hate mail for you, Mark, but I don't care for the Stones. So, sorry.
I have a friend of mine who says the one of the worst bands he's ever heard is Led Zeppelin, which makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Well, they're not allowed on this show. All right. I'm just going to name my 5. It's basically because this was at a time when I I was most impressionable. I do know songs from these albums. There's a stretch of their catalog that just wasn't anything that I was listening to. But so again, not in any order, just how I wrote them down. Exile on Main Street, Sticky Fingers, Let It Bleed, Beggar's Banquet, and Some Girls. Has nothing to do with if they're any good or anything. It's what I like. That's how I did it. Okay.
All five of them
all
are
those
great
albums
albums.
are in the wheelhouse of what would be Rolling Stone
Cool.
classic
But
albums. They
I'm-
weren't like a one hit single kind of albums. They had stuff on them, interesting things.
Sure
But
did.
I'll leave it to the guys to give me like how many seconds this number 3, this third song on Let It Bleed was, and who, yodeled on it or whatever. So go ahead, guys.
All right,
Sadly, we
Mr.
probably know that.
Yes, Mr. Crichton.
Sadly is true. All right. Well, like I said, being that it's the Beatles versus the Stones,
Mhm.
I'm not going past 1969. So
Okay.
that eliminates my favorite Stones album of all time, Exile on Main Street, and it eliminates my number 2 favorite Stones album, Sticky Fingers. Some Girls would be in my top 6 or 7.
We could have a real battle here.
So I'm only going 64 to 69 with the Stones because that's the
Okay.
battle between the Beatles and the Stones. So my number 5 is an incredible record that if you don't know this album, you need to go listen to it. It was released. Gosh, I'm looking at the release date on this. Almost 60 years ago. February 13th, 1965, when on a break from touring, they go into Chess Studios in Chicago, and I took a tour of that studio, and what the guy that was running at the time, he said, like, we're like jamming and getting ready to cut a record, and in come these 5 skinny English guys, to use our studio, and they're thinking like, who are these guys and what do they know? And they knocked off like I think four or 5 songs, not quite half the album, because half of the Rolling Stones Now album in England came out as the Rolling Stones number 2.
Correct.
But
That's why it's like this thing where they had 3 albums in 1965.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So the Rolling Stones Now album there was only 4 songs that Mick and Keith wrote, including the single Heart of Stone, which is a Stones classic. But they did incredible R&B covers on that album. They did Otis Redding's Pain in My Heart, Bo Diddley's Mona, Solomon Burke's Everybody Needs Somebody to Love, which opens the record, Chuck Berry's You Can't Catch Me, Willie Dixon's classic Little Red Rooster. You hear Brian Jones's slide guitar on that song, and it's priceless. So Rolling
better than the original?
Now is my number 5.
Okay.
My number 4 Stones album came out just a few months after that. And an album that'll turn 60 this summer.
Yeah.
The Stones album, Out of Our Head, and the American version of this album, not the British version.
Okay. So they had less songs on it.
It had 12 songs as opposed to 14. Yes. But Out of Our Heads was their breakout album.
Yes.
Because Satisfaction wound up being like a huge hit. And it also it has which I consider almost equal to Satisfaction. Maybe in depending on my mood, the last time I might like even more. But it also has that album Play with Fire, The Spider and the Fly. Also, they do Marvin Gaye's Hitchhike and Sam Cooke's Good Times.
Yeah,
And Ovi Wright's mixed vocal on That's How Strong My Love is ridiculous. It's so good. So Out of Our Heads is number 4 for me. Number 3 is Aftermath. which was released in April of '66, and was their first album of all original tunes. So both the UK and the US version are great. It's funny because the the UK version of that album starts out with Mother's Little Helper, and the US version of that album starts out with Paint It Black. Neither one of those songs are on each other's album. Like, so
Really?
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Cool.
But it's got Lady Jane, Under My Thumb is on that album. The UK version has Out of Time, which is a great song, and then the 11.5-minute epic Going Home, which is a fantastic elongated R&B song. So Aftermath is number 3 for me. Number 2 would be Beggar's Banquet, which began the quartet of Jimmy Miller produced albums like Beggar's Banquet, followed by Let It Bleed, followed by Sticky Fingers, followed by Exile. Those 4 albums, for me, are the best Stones albums ever. But that album, it starts out with Sympathy, ends with Salt of the Earth, Jigsaw Puzzle that closes side 1, and then it's followed by You Flip It Over and you get Street Fighting Man. And so and then you have the marvelous Nicky Hopkins playing keyboards on most of that album too. So Beggar's Banquet is number 2 in that 5-year period. And number 1 was the second Jimmy Miller produced record, Let It Bleed, which it was Brian Jones's last recordings on a few songs and Mick Taylor's first recordings with the Stones. Great closing with You Can't Always Get What You Want. Has a country version of Honky Tonk Woman.
Mm-hmm.
The concert Showstopper, Midnight Rambler, which live, that song always blew me away. When the first time I saw the Stones in '72 at Maple Leaf Gardens, and that was the Showstopper. And then, of course, the incredible opening song, Give Me Shelter. One of the greatest rock songs ever.
Mm-hmm.
So, Let It Bleed, numero
Nice.
uno, from '64 to '69.
Jeff, can I ask something of you?
Yeah.
Don't ever say that an album that's about to turn 60 is old, okay? Because I'm 60. Because I'm 62.
Well,
I'm
I
right behind
got you
you.
beat there, Deb.
Right behind
That's
you.
okay. I still love you. It's all right. You'll get yours.
All
I'm
right,
a Scorpio. I never forget.
That's true.
Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest rock and roll band in the world,
Oh
the
no.
Rolling Stones.
Yes.
With
All
that
right,
voice, I can't argue.
let's start at number 5. Well, Jeffrey and I have battled on this one over the years. Some say it's outside the Stones' incredible run that started in 1968 and lasted 4 great albums. Well, I'm going to stick with the thought that continued right into this album, 5 in a row, after having been in the south of France, stuck in a basement for their previous record. Like the previous album, the Stones were recording anywhere other than the United Kingdom at this time because they were tax exiles. They went to Jamaica for this one. Mick Taylor was still around, along with some other great musicians such as Billy Preston, Nicky Hopkins, Ian Stewart, Bobby Keys. Keith Richards said that Jamaica was one of just a couple places that the whole band could get into in those days. There's just some incredible tracks on this legendary album, including the smash Angie, plus Heartbreaker, Do, Star Star, which would have plenty of radio edits if played on terrestrial radio today. And then there was incredible deep cuts on this album, including Winter and Silver Train. And really interesting, I dug into and found out that Bill Wyman played bass on only 3 tracks on this album. I'm talking about the great 1973 album, Goat's Head Soup, at number 5. Number 4, found out years later, was not one of Mick's favorite albums. Many historians and musicologists and critics label this the Stones' best effort. It's not my top album, but I might consider it the band's most complete album. At the time, it not really a very consistent album. It's kind of all over the place. Mick Jagger actually was quoted as saying, the songs themselves are not really, I'm not saying they're no good, but it's funny. First of all, there's a lot of songs, so it's hard to keep up to the standard, so to speak. But when you actually come to do them, there's a lot of songs that are really like not songs at all. End quote. 18 songs on this double set, and only 2 were singles, Happy and Tumbling Dice.
Yeah.
Jagger went on to say they're really nicely played and everything, but there's no hooks in them, and there's no memorable lyrics in them. Sweet Black Angel, he referenced. These are very nice songs, but no one's ever gonna, it's not my thing to get up and play them. Quite interesting, but a legendary album nonetheless. Exile on Main Street.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Number 3, this was my first real Stones record. I mean, I knew the Stones, but this one was my real first Stones record. I was introduced actually at a younger age to Hot Rocks, which came out in 1972, and that was the double compilation that had a whole bunch of the Stones British Invasion era hits, and then some from Beggars and Bleed and Sticky Fingers. Before Beggars, there really was no great Stones album from beginning to end. They were a collection of some very good songs, but in the album era that we've come to know, it just wasn't the same. So when this one came out in 1981, it was the year of my first Stones show at the stadium. Start Me Up just exploded and just blew you away when it came out. Hang Fire, Waiting on a Friend were both big radio hits. But for me, after all these years, side 2 of Tattoo You might be the best side of a Stones record ever. Side 2, deep tracks with just an incredible atmosphere of singing, of musicianship. Mick Jagger with various different voices. I just love it. Tattoo You, number 3. I can't ever get enough of this 1969 release. Upon the release of this album and the impending breakup of the Beatles, the Stones took over as the greatest rock and roll band in the world. They truly were on their way as the bad boys of rock and roll. Brian Jones died. The Hells Angels killed a man and caused mass rioting and disaster at the Altamont Speedway. And everyone was thinking Jagger was the devil. All might have been the case, other than the last. But once you put the record on, you went to a whole new place. So many tracks that I would simply rank probably amongst my 10, not only my 10 greatest Stone songs of all time, but possibly the greatest songs of all time. Give Me Shelter, You Can't Always Get What You Want, Honky Tonk Women, Midnight Rambler, Live With Me, and just so many more. You can have Let It Be. I'm taking Let It Bleed.
Love in Vain.
Yeah.
Love in
Vain. Another great one, too. And finally, this is my second favorite album of all time, my first favorite Stones album of all time. The jacket cover itself, the album cover released originally, just added to that bad boy image. Having been so young at the time, I never really got it or saw it until probably close to a decade later when my mother wasn't looking. But the songs were just downright dirty and just the ultimate Stones swagger and groove. So many tried to imitate it and did a pretty good job, most specifically like Steven Tyler and Aerosmith, and then later on Chris Robinson and the Black Crowes, Brown Sugar, Wild Horses, Sister Morphine, Dead Flowers, Bitch, radio edit, and the amazing song that's unlike any other Stones record, Can't You Hear Me Knocking? The ultimate Stones record and my number 1, 1971's Sticky Fingers.
Sticky Fingers.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
I'm gonna gotta go to broadcasting school before my next show. I gotta get a voice.
All right. Well, I definitely agree with Jeff Crichton on Out of Our Heads. That's it's got everything it needed to have at that time and in that year and that era. And that kind of set, I think, the tone and pace for what was to come. Obviously, I think back then it was a lot of people were doing easy covers. They weren't doing easy covers. They were doing harder covers, less snow. Kind of reminds me again of the Tragically Hip when they were first starting and they were doing Dylan covers and not the Dylan covers you were expecting Dylan to do, right? And that they would do. Um, so that's my number 5. My number 4, yes, Sticky Fingers is it's got everything. And I will take this moment to shout out to Marion Faithfull all this week on,
Yes.
on album for today. She will be featured. As a matter of fact, after this or during the filming of this, I've got to go back and do today's album. But Sister Morphine is pretty much on her table, and this band kind of might have been the ruination of her first lifetime in the music industry. But she's spent other 2 different lifetimes in it, and more on that as the weeks go on. So as the week goes on, I should say. My number 3 is right after that, and that's Exile on Main Street. It is not my favorite Stones album, but I do understand that it is one of the greatest produced albums again of all time. The funny part about it is my 2 favorite Stones albums are not going to be anywhere near this list. They won't be. I don't know why I love them, but I will tell you, Steel Wheels for me. I don't know. That instrumental Continental Drift. I don't know why or how, but it entranced me, and that whole album. I thought it was the Stones not being the Stones. Technically, they were. I don't know whether it was a little bit of prog, maybe. I don't know what it was, but I'm that album. I listen to it every time and I get something else out of it. And my number 1, I think it's the badassest Stones record. It's the largest selling tour. They had it lock, stock, and 2 smoking barrels. They had the tongue right. They had the cover right. They had songs that were sexier than this bullshit Sticky Fingers cover, where they, put a sock in there. No, this time they let it all hang out. Voodoo Lounge is ridiculous. I love listening to that record. It puts me right in the era. They were the biggest band on the planet back in '69, and they did it again in 1994. They were selling out stadiums, and people were hanging outside trying to get in. So those are mine. Obviously, there's a hell of a lot of difference between out of our heads to Voodoo Lounge.
I'm not surprised though. That's why you do this show, Mark.
So I'm sitting there going, well, there's no way in hell any of my top 2 are going to in the fight at all. But
did Voodoo Lounge, did that have 16 songs on it? I'm trying.
It had a shitload of songs on it. Yeah, I think it's up.
It was
there,
a good album. 16, it was a good album.
Yeah.
There's a couple that I don't think there's a perfect Stones record, to be honest with you. I think there's some. It's not filler, but it's just something that didn't fit right, or I might argue that out of our heads might be the one that has, like, every time I listen to that, it seems like it's all in there together, even though there's covers and they just seem to be all together. And Exile on Main Street would be a close one too. So having done that this I will tell you right now where we're at. So the Beatles are set. The number 1 in our moving on would be Abbey Road. That would be the number 1 selected. And that will be facing the number 4, which was the least, but the most of the least votes.
Yes.
Yeah, that one too fast. Rubber Soul. So Abbey Road will go up against Rubber Soul. And number 2 is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Band. That will be number 2 going up against Revolver. So that one's a little dicey. That'll be a real test. So now with the Stones, we will find our number 1 and number 2 are, holy cow, this is, so Let It Bleed is number 1. Sticky Fingers is number 2. And Exile on Main Street will go up against Sticky Fingers. And up against Let It Bleed will be Beggar's Banquet.
Ooh, okay.
You're gonna have to make choices, Jeff.
You got that's the Jimmy Miller trifecta there.
And there's no question that is a very powerful statement and well stated, because sometimes the producer, right? You know, it makes
Yeah, there you
choices.
go. There
Yeah.
you go.
That's why when Jimmy Miller came out of retirement and produced a couple albums by Primal Scream, if you ever heard those records by
I
Primal
have.
Scream, they sounded like Stones albums from 68, 69.
Yeah, and it didn't sound anything like the band
No,
Primal Scream,
no.
right? And that's what kind of threw me. I don't know.
Which for me, that was good.
Yeah, well, I never hold them in like a high regard to begin with anyway, but
Right.
they're in the
They're a
the music
cult band.
multiverse, no question. But
Yeah.
All right. So let's start off with I don't know how we did this last time, so I guess I should have watched that 3-hour show. No, it wasn't 3 hours. It took me 3 hours to edit it. So we'll start off with Sgt. Pepper's Hearts Club Band versus Revolver, and we'll start with you, Deb. Which one can move on in your
Sgt. Pepper.
ears?
Sgt. Pepper.
Jeff.
Gotta pick.
Like, do you like your right hand or your left hand?
I love
Those
it.
albums
I
are one
love
and the
it.
same.
I know. That's
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Revolver.
Ray.
Pepper, Sergeant Pepper's.
Yeah, because I'm gonna be Revolver.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
That right now it's
We're
under
tied.
instant replay, so the Kansas City Chiefs will win.
Shush. That's Groundhog Day. Groundhog Day. Mahomes is the groundhog, and Bill Murray is poor Josh Allen.
Ray, we'll start with you
Bill.
with Abbey Road versus Rubber Soul.
Me?
Yep.
This could be a different pick tomorrow and a different pick the day after, because again, these are just
Oh, wait till the next one.
oh yeah.
Pick Rubber Road. Rubber Road.
Eat my rubber.
I'll take Abbey Road.
Okay. Jeff.
Rubber Soul.
Wow.
Oh my
all right.
God.
Deb.
Abbey Road.
I'm gonna take Abbey Road as well.
Okay, cool.
So Abbey Road will move on without instant replay, although great albums all around.
Yeah.
Someone has to be moving on, and I always have to. We'll go over to the Stones side. So Sticky Fingers versus Exile on Main Street.
Oof.
Let's start with Deb.
Me? Jeff?
Yeah.
Deb? Me?
Yeah,
Okay.
damn.
Sticky Fingers.
Mr. Crichton.
Exile.
Ray.
Sticky Fingers.
My number 2 favorite Stones album of all time.
And I'm going to be Exile on Main Street.
Oh no. What did Sue?
So Sue, did she pick? I don't think she picked.
Did she pick either one of them?
Yeah, she did. She had Sticky Fingers. She did not pick the Exile on Main Street. So
Okay,
Sticky
so that's a
Fingers-
winner.
Sticky Fingers will move on.
Okay.
Let It Bleed will now go against Beggar's Banquet, and we'll start with Ray.
Let It Bleed.
Mr. Crichton.
Let It Bleed.
Damn.
Let It Bleed.
I am inconsequential, and I would have been. Would I have been Beggar's Banquet? No, I would have been neither. Although my favorite Stone song is on Beggar's Banquet. Oh, Sergeant
There's
Pepper.
not.
She's-
Bummer.
Sergeant Pepper's. We'll move on.
Oh, it is.
Yes,
Oh, this.
yeah.
Okay.
She had Sergeant Pepper's over Revolver.
Before. Okay.
Sergeant Pepper was number 3. Revolver was 4.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
All right. So now it will be Abbey Road versus Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band. Deb.
Abbey Road.
Mr. Crichton.
Beatles 6.
Now I got to figure out what's the 6th album.
All right, Beatles 65.
Yeah. Was that the speed you were playing it at? I stop.
Abby.
Abby. The Man Above Me.
Abbey Road.
And it is inconsequential. It will be Abbey Road. All right. And finally, on the Stones side, we have Sticky Fingers versus Let It Bleed.
Oh,
Yes, it's gonna be
There's
Ray.
Race
Ray,
first.
would you like a timeout?
nah, I got to go in order. I mean, both are top 5 albums of all time for me. Sticky Fingers.
Jeff Crichton.
I like, since at the beginning of the show, I said, because I'm only choosing between 64 and 69, which eliminates Exile on Main Street and Sticky Fingers. So now I get to vote on both of them.
Yes.
So I'm going Sticky.
Okay. So let me ask you a question though. Were the Beatles broken up already? It was
in 69, yeah. Abbey
Okay,
Road.
well, I'm playing devil's advocate because when that Klaatu record came out, everybody thought it was the Beatles reuniting from.
I didn't.
Maybe you could slip it in. Okay, but Sticky Fingers it is. All right,
Yeah,
Deb.
McCartney had his solo hits out already by the time of Sticky Fingers.
Yeah.
Sticky fingers for me.
All right, and I would have been Sticky Fingers probably. Yeah. So that was like when watching the Stanley Cup playoffs and you get to the next round and it was 4 and out. And you're like, oh man, that was uneventful. So for our final battle, the final war, it will be Abbey Road versus Sticky Fingers.
Oh my God.
Incredible.
This is not where I thought this was going to go when I first made this.
Really?
This is great. So now I can.
Oh, I would love to, at the end, I would like to know what you thought how it was going to be. That would be great. Okay.
All right. Dan, we'll start with you.
Even though I said earlier in the program that I'm not a fan of the Stones, let me back that up. I mean, all of their hits, I love. I saw them in concert. It's just that it wasn't, Mick Jagger wasn't for me. Okay. That's probably how that comes to be in a young girl's mind.
But wait a minute. So Mick wasn't for you. Obviously, the drummer from the Beatles wasn't for you. So
No.
that's even. So let's take those 2 out.
Okay, all right. So everybody, it's an even matchup now.
Yes,
Here
we're
we go.
back to.
I have to say I have an emotional attachment to this album. I can't argue which one is better than the other. Really, as far as hits and longevity and what they mean to people. But for me, on a personal level, it has to be Abbey Road.
Incredible album.
Jeff Crichton, as if I have to even ask.
Jeff Parade.
Well, you know what? They're my 2 favorite bands of all time.
Oh, okay.
But if you're gonna choose one of the, choosing one over the other, then I just have to say, you have to come together.
Yes.
Right now.
Yeah.
Apparently over Sticky Fingers. No, okay. Ray.
Let me get rid of this shirt. Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest band in the world, Sticky Fingers.
All right. And I'm Voodoo Lounge. No. So I am going to Abbey Road. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to pick the Beatles' second album.
Yes. Yes. So Abbey Road will be
or the Hey Jude album.
Yeah. Yeah. How many songs weren't on that record? That was the record.
The Hey Jude album?
Yeah.
That was just a greatest hits album too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That had 10 songs. And there's a story behind that won't be told tonight.
Okay. So Abbey Road will be in the discussion for the end of the year. That will be a hard album to beat. But again, though, it's a Buffalo band. So far, it's all bees, Buffalo and Beatles. So that's what we've got so far. 9 more to go, and then
Alrighty.
who's ever coming from the other. I will say that my thought process might have been that it could have been the White Album versus Exile on Main Street was my original mindset. Was like, wow, what would that be like, you know? But well, I will thank the panel for doing this tonight. This isn't easy. This takes you know, a lot of preparation and then the voting, and you know, I'm just glad it all worked out for the Beatles, because I was afraid what might happen if it didn't.
It's been all good.
Yeah.
All good.
So next month, the war decree.
Do we know what it
Welcome.
is?
Welcome to the battle of albums that are 50 years old.
1985.
1975.
Oh, 75. Oh,
So that will be
Ooh.
the war is
physical
on.
graffiti.
Yes. There's a
I'm out.
75
Born to
good
run.
albums.
Born to run.
So let us know what your list, how you would have played this out, what your number one would have been on each side. You can give us all 5 too. I don't care, one way or the other. Hit the like button if you so choose to. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Just to give everybody a heads up, we are now over 200 subscribers. We were last week went over 201, 102. So things are slowly gathering momentum. Not that it matters. It's not
2025.
yeah. So we're on the web at beyondyourradio.com, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, of course, articles, videos, that podcast when I have a day. All about music, albums, bands, artists. Join us next week for 19 albums from Joni Mitchell as we do the catalog review show. 19 albums. And I picked up the anthology yesterday from the library, and I was thinking about maybe there was something in there, and the very first song on the anthology was recorded at the convention center, Niagara Falls, from 1975.
That's a sign.
There it is. It was a sign to just put it back and get back to the 19 albums. There's nothing in it. Go Beyond Your Radio with us, a real music appreciation channel. Thanks for watching and happy listening.
Bye.